My daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't eat too much. You didn't pay for any of this after all." I just smiled, pushed my chair back, and walked right out of my own birthday dinner, the one I'd secretly covered weeks in advance. An hour later, when their card got declined, they finally figured out who was really holding the reins. That first bite never made it to my mouth. Welcome back to Ashes of Inheritance, where ordinary women keep their composure while everything around them falls apart and walk away with their dignity intact. If you believe the quietest person at the table is often the one holding the most, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I was sitting in one of the nicest steakhouse in town at a table I'd booked weeks ahead of time. My son Ryan and his wife Lauren were across from me. Just as I lifted my fork, Lauren leaned in with this thin little smile and said, "Don't stuff yourself, Martha. You didn't pay for this." Then she added, "Let the real family enjoy the good stuff." I'm Martha, 67 years old, and right then, something inside me just cracked. I had planned and paid for the whole evening myself. Private room, the full 3-course menu, flowers on the table. I wanted one nice night where we could feel like a real family again. Instead, I sat there while my daughter-in-law treated me like some freeloader who'd wandered into the wrong party. The worst part, my son stayed quiet. Ryan just stared at his water glass. He didn't say, "Knock it off." He didn't say, "That's my mom." He let it happen. So, I set my fork down, nice and calm, grabbed my coat and purse and stood up. No yelling, no tears. I just said softly, "You two enjoy the rest of the night." Lauren rolled her eyes. What they didn't know was that the reservations, the whole fancy meal, and the open bar tab were already running on my credit card. I'd set it up in advance with the maîtresse and old acquaintance with one very specific instruction. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air hit my face. It wasn't some big victory. It was just a clear, heavy realization. For years, I'd been cutting them slack on the rent for the in-law suite upstairs in my house. I'd covered groceries when money was tight for them. I was always the one who jumped in to help, and the first one forgotten when it came to basic respect. In about an hour, the maîtresse would walk over to their table, and that illusion of control they thought they had, it was about to vanish into thin air. I drove home and pulled into the driveway of my solid brick house, the one my late husband and I had built together. No lights were on upstairs in the in-law apartment. Ryan and Lauren were still at the restaurant, probably sipping the expensive wine I'd picked out. In the kitchen, I made myself a cup of tea. The quiet in the house didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt protective. I sat there thinking about how we'd gotten to this point. Ryan had always been a quiet kid, but ever since he married Lauren, his voice had pretty much disappeared. Lauren loved being in charge. She controlled the money, the weekend plans, and more how Ryan treated me. I'd let it slide for the sake of keeping the peace. For the sake of peace had been my excuse for years, the phrase that kept me quiet. I'd let them live rent-free upstairs so they could save for their own place. Instead of saving, they blew money on fancy clothes and complained about the old windows in the house. Lauren had even started telling me when I could use my own backyard so I wouldn't bother the kids, even though they didn't have any. I'd become a tenant in my own life, but that dinner at the steakhouse ripped the veil away. If you're going to insult someone at the table, you'd better be ready to pick up the check yourself. I pulled out a folder from the cabinet. Inside were all the monthly utility bills and the automatic payments I'd been making for their share of electricity and water. It added up to a lot over the years. Money I'd gladly given because I thought it was help between people who loved each other. But love without respect. That's just being taken advantage of. I sipped my tea and waited. I knew my phone would ring soon enough. The reality back at the restaurant had to be hitting their table by now. I set the phone aside and turned off the light. Around 10:00 my phone buzzed on the kitchen table. It was Ryan. I let it ring. Then a text from Lauren Martha. What is this nonsense? The waiter says the card was declined. I almost smiled. I hadn't told the bank to freeze anything. I just told the restaurant manager that if I left early, I was pulling my authorization. Now they were sitting there with a bill over $400 and no help they'd been counting on. The phone rang again. This time I picked up. Ryan sounded frantic. Mom, why'd you leave? We're stuck here. The bill is insane. I thought the real family was supposed to enjoy it. Ryan, I said calmly. And since Lauren said I wasn't paying, I didn't want to cause any trouble. I just canceled my part of the authorization. There was a second of dead silence. Then I heard Lauren in the background fuming. This is blackmail. We don't have the cash right now. That was the truth. They were living beyond their means because I'd been the safety net under their feet. It's not blackmail, Lauren, I said firmly. It's the consequence of your own words. If I'm not real family, then I don't have to pay. I hung up. A few minutes later, I heard their car screech into the driveway. The front door flew open downstairs. I'd thrown the deadbolt from the inside, something I hadn't done in years. They had a key to my floor for emergencies, but tonight, the only emergency was their bruised egos. They pounded on the door. Martha, open up. We need to talk, Lauren shouted. Her tone wasn't asking, it was demanding. I didn't answer. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door. That night, I learned that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you finally lock when the wrong people are in the house. The peace was broken, but it wasn't my fault. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet. Normally, I'd hear Lauren stomping around upstairs, the washer spinning, or Ryan loudly hunting for his keys. Today, nothing. I made my breakfast and actually enjoyed the calm. At exactly 9, there was a knock on my door, hesitant, not pounding like the night before. I opened it. Ryan stood there alone, looking pale with red-rimmed eyes. Mom, can we please be reasonable? He asked quietly. He stepped inside without waiting and sat at the kitchen table. Last night was humiliating. We had to borrow money from Lauren's brother just to get out of the restaurant. I sat across from him. The humiliating part wasn't the bill, Ryan. It was how your wife acted and how you said nothing. He wouldn't meet my eyes. She doesn't mean it. She's just stressed from work. You know, we count on your help. No, I said clearly. You've been counting on my good nature while treating me like an old piece of furniture that's in the way. That stops today. I slid a document across the table, an itemized list of the monthly house expenses. I've decided to rent out the in-law suite starting next month at fair market rate. You can stay, but you'll need to sign a lease and cover your full share of the utilities yourself. Ryan stared at the paper like it might bite him. We can't afford that. You know, we're saving for a house. You're not saving, Ryan. You're buying designer bags and taking 2 vacations a year while I cover the property taxes and furnace maintenance alone. Just then, Lauren appeared in the doorway. She'd clearly been listening. You're not doing that, she said, her voice shaking. We're family. You can't just jack up the rent on us. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm not jacking it up. I'm starting it. If I'm just a guest who isn't allowed to eat at the table, then from now on, you're just tenants who live here. The next few days, the house felt like a deep freeze. Lauren tried the passive-aggressive route, moving my patio furniture out of the way, putting her trash bins right in front of my kitchen window, completely ignoring me in the hallway. Ryan floated around like a ghost caught between sides. I felt sorry for him, but pity wasn't a good enough reason to keep abandoning myself. I didn't react to her little jabs. Instead, I took action. I called a handyman. The big shared basement was almost completely taken over by their junk old boxes, exercise equipment. They never used broken furniture. I had him build a dividing wall and lock off my side. When Lauren saw her stuff neatly stacked on their half, her face turned beet red. "What the hell is this? We need that space," she screamed at me down there. I stayed calm and kept supervising the work. "This is my house, Lauren. I need my half of the basement for my own projects. You've got plenty of room upstairs once you finally clear some of that clutter." She threatened to move out. "Then do it," I said simply. She hadn't expected that. She thought dangling the grandkids we didn't have yet, or cutting off contact would make me fold. But I'd already started rebuilding my own life. I signed up for a pottery class and planned a trip to the coast. I realized how much energy I'd wasted trying to keep them happy. Energy that was finally flowing back to me. That same evening, I saw Ryan in the driveway washing her car. I opened the window. Ryan, the lease is still sitting on my table. If it's not signed by Friday, I'm putting an ad up for the apartment. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw a spark of respect in his eyes. Or maybe it was just fear. Either way, it was a start. I closed the window and went back to my book. Friday came, and with it the signed lease dropped silently in my mailbox. But that was just the paperwork. The real test hit that weekend. For years, it had been tradition I did Sunday dinner. I'd shop, spend hours in the kitchen, and serve a roast or some fancy casserole. Ryan and Lauren would sit down at the set table, eat, then disappear upstairs while I did the dishes. This Sunday, the kitchen stayed cold. I set the table for one. When there was a knock, I knew who it was. Ryan and Lauren stood there in their Sunday clothes. "Doesn't smell like roast," Lauren said, looking around. "There isn't any?" I answered, taking a bite of my salad. I decided everyone can take care of themselves. After our last family dinner at the steakhouse, it seemed like the smartest move. Lauren snorted. "That's ridiculous. You cook for yourself anyway." "Exactly," I said. "And that's what I'm doing now. If you want to join, we can talk about splitting costs and a dish schedule. But today, I'd rather eat alone." They stormed back upstairs. Pretty soon, I heard them ordering delivery. Eating out or ordering in every day gets expensive fast, and I knew their budget couldn't handle it for long. I started being consistent. If they left the hallway light on, I turned it off. If Lauren left packages in the hall for days, I moved them right to their door. I wasn't rude. I just wasn't their maid anymore. One afternoon, I ran into Ryan in the yard. He looked worn out. "She's impossible, Mom. She complains about you all day. That's her problem, not mine, Ryan. You get to choose how you handle it." He went quiet. I could see him thinking about his life for the first time. The comfort I'd provided had been the glue holding their relationship together. Now that the glue was gone, the cracks were showing. 2 weeks later, what I'd half expected happened. I came back from grocery shopping and saw my apartment door cracked open. My heart picked up, but I stayed calm. I heard voices in the living room. Lauren and her mother digging through my china cabinet where I kept my grandmother's valuable porcelain. She never uses it anyway. I heard Lauren's mom say it's just collecting dust. Ryan says she wants money for everything now, so we might as well sell some of this. I stepped into the room. "Put that back right now," I said in a voice that left no room for argument. Lauren jumped and nearly dropped a cup. "Martha, we were just..." Ryan said we could borrow a few things. Ryan doesn't decide what happens here. This is my property. Get out of my apartment immediately. Lauren's mom tried the condescending tone. Don't be so sensitive. Families help each other. Helping isn't the same as stealing. I shot back. I waited until they left, then called a locksmith. Within 2 hours, every lock on my floor had been changed. That evening, when Ryan tried his old key and it didn't work, he knocked. I opened the door only as far as the security chain allowed. Why did you change the locks? He asked, stunned. Because your wife and her mother tried to steal my heirlooms today, Ryan. The trust is completely gone. From now on, you or Lauren come into my apartment only when I specifically invite you. He looked crushed. Mom, it doesn't have to go this far. It already went this far when you let her try to rob me in my own house. I closed the door. It hurt seeing my son like that. But I knew any backsliding would only invite more boundary crossing. I wasn't good old Martha who forgave everything anymore. I was a woman protecting what was hers, her home and her dignity. The new rent payments and full share of utilities changed life in the house fast. Ryan and Lauren couldn't afford their flashy lifestyle anymore. I watched Ryan start biking to work because they had to return one of the leased cars. Lauren looked older, the arrogant shine gone from her eyes. One evening, Ryan came down alone. He looked humble. I let him in but didn't offer tea. We sat in the living room. We have to move out, Mom, said quietly. We can't pay the rent here and the debt to Lauren's brother at the same time. I nodded. That's a sensible choice. This house is too small for two households that don't get along. He looked at me hopefully. Could you at least loan us the security deposit for a new place? Just a little boost. I looked at him for a long moment. Ryan, I supported you two for years. The money I'm saving now that I'm not shopping and cooking for you is going into my retirement. I'm not loaning you anymore. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. He looked disappointed, but didn't argue. He finally seemed to understand that the bank of Mom was closed for business. Lauren raged upstairs when she heard. I could hear her yelling through the ceiling, calling me cheap and spiteful. It didn't touch me anymore. I'd learned to separate her words from who I was. I wasn't spiteful. I was fair. If someone calls you not real family when it's time to give, they don't get family privileges when it's time to take. I was already making plans for the upstairs apartment. Maybe rent it to a nice teacher or a quiet older couple, someone who respected the rules and appreciated the house. The future felt wide open and bright. That weekend, Ryan and Lauren packed their boxes. It was a quiet move. No big goodbye scenes, no drama, just the plain reality of 2 people who had driven away their biggest supporter. 3 months after they moved out, the house was more peaceful than it had been in years. The upstairs was rented to a friendly young teacher who paid her rent on time and followed our clear agreement about the yard and chores. No blow-ups, no unpaid bills. Ryan called every once in a while. He and Lauren were in a small 2-bedroom place on the edge of town. He often sounded down, but also more awake. He told me he'd started handling his own finances and that Lauren had to get a part-time job. It's tough, Mom, he admitted one day on the phone. But I think I'm starting to get what you meant. I was glad for that small step, but I didn't rush in to fix everything. Our relationship had to grow on a new foundation, equal footing. Lauren never apologized. I didn't expect her to anymore. People like her always see themselves as the victims, never the ones who caused the problems. One Sunday, I invited Ryan over for coffee, just him. We sat in the garden I'd replanted. It was a beautiful day. Why you actually do it at the restaurant? He asked suddenly. Why didn't you just tell us you were paying? Because words stopped working with you two a long time ago, Ryan, I said. I had to show you what the world feels like when I'm not there to clean up the mess. Lauren needed to feel that her arrogance comes with a price, and you needed to feel that your silence has consequences. He nodded slowly. We didn't rehash the past. We talked about his job and my winter plans instead. I could tell he was starting to see me as my own person again, not just a resource. It was a fragile new beginning. I was willing to give him a chance, but the boundaries stayed firm. The house was still my domain, and my life was mine. Today, I'm sitting on my patio, looking out at the neat lawn. The house is quiet, the sun warm on my face. I just got a postcard from Ryan. He took a few days away by himself to think. He wrote that he's proud he did his first tax return on his own without any help. I smile. Small steps in the right direction. I don't regret a thing. Not the night at the steakhouse, not changing the locks, not the firmness it took to hold my ground. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do isn't giving. It's refusing to give. I gave Ryan the chance to grow up, and I gave myself the chance to age with dignity. My porcelain is safe in the cabinet, and my savings let me live without worry. I've learned you can't force someone to value you, but you can sure stop the people who don't from using you. Lauren and I will probably never be friends, and that's fine. I don't need her approval to feel worthwhile anymore. I'm Martha. I'm independent, and I decide who sits at my table. When I go out to eat these days, it's with people who value my company more than my credit card. Life's too short for bad company and lukewarm relationships. I take a sip of my tea and breathe deep. The air smells like fresh cut grass and freedom. I learned my lesson and I taught it well. My house is a home again, and my heart is light. That night at the steakhouse was the start of something new. A life where I'm no longer the one quietly paying the price for peace. I'm the one enjoying the peace I built for myself. And that kind of peace, it's priceless. Not everyone who stays quiet is weak.